Hello, welcome to the October edition of Tax Talk. My name's Anita Monteith and I'm a technical manager with the ICAEW. With me today we have Caroline Miskin, who is our practitioner tax manager. Hello, Caroline.
Hello.
And a special guest, we have Richard Wild from the Chartered Institute of Tax. Hello,
Hi,
Richard.
Hi.
Well, thank you for coming to join us today because we're at the beginning of a new focused joint working project, aren't we?
We are, yes.
Our chief execs got together at the ICAEW recently.
Yeah, they got together a couple of weeks ago, and actually we really decided that there's so much going on in the world of tax at the moment that and we've got very common interests, so it makes sense just for us to work together, particularly on a number of sort of key areas, you know, Brexit sort of being one of them, where we started to work, you know, a lot more closely, and with the Institute of Chartered Accountants in Scotland as well.
Yes, and of course we have been working together specifically, I know, on private client. Our private client committees work closely together.
Yes.
And so it is natural with so much changing that we carry on. One particular project that the chief execs decided was we were going to write a joint letter on NTD. We're going to be talking about that a bit later.
We did, yes. Sort of both our institutes got together and we jointly wrote to Mel Stride, the Minister, and to John Thompson at HMRC just about making tax digital, just around some of the concerns that we have with April 19 being, ever closer. So yeah. We'll talk about some of those a bit later on, I think. Yeah,
and obviously Caroline has been working with you very closely on that. But just to kick off with, we thought we might talk a little bit about Brexit, because that's been a real challenge, hasn't it?
It has, and I think for many reasons, but one of which being that we don't really know what Brexit is going to look like, and also across sort of our institutes, with so much going on, as we've said, it's hard to know really what to tell members. So we've got our heads together. We've done a fact sheet that, as I say, jointly and in conjunction with ICAS. And so it's just, this one focuses on the Taxation Cross-Border Trade Act, as it now is. We've got royal assent on the, if I just look at my note briefly, on 13th of September, I should know that off by heart, shouldn't I? And just to provide a bit of background as to what the Act does, just to sort of a high level so that members can just familiarise themselves what it means, and then maybe what might be coming in the future as well. Yeah,
I mean, it wasn't a slim document, and when we were working on it, it was still a bill. Yes. And then it turned into an act.
Yes, just in the process as we were doing it, we can call it's an act now. Yes, indeed. Yeah.
And it does give us a no-deal framework, doesn't it?
Well, it's unusual in that actually, in some respects, it tries to accommodate all potential outcomes from, whatever deal we get when we leave the EU. So it provides more of a framework for future legislation, particularly in the form of regulations, rather than really making lots of new laws itself. So I think, we will certainly see, probably between now and Christmas or into the new year, lots of regulations coming which really look at the detailed requirements, and particularly more when we know what sort of deal we've got leaving the EU.
And of course historically you're a VAT specialist, aren't you? That's your background.
I am, for my sins, or I am probably 15, 16 years or so at least as a VAT specialist, yeah.
So VAT, freight forwarding, any other specialist topics that we feel there's a shortage going to emerge post-Brexit?
Yes,
specialisms?
and especially in customs duties as well. Certainly what we've found, and one of the reasons
Caroline and I have signed up already, we're going to go on a course.
Well, and so should a lot of people. And this is why, another of the reasons why we've chosen to work together, because actually knowledge and expertise in customs duty and excise, it's a lot more niche than perhaps, people think VAT is niche, but customs and excise are a little bit more so. So there is a real sort of lack of expertise in that area.
Yeah, and of course for businesses, we now know that HMRC has written to 140,000 businesses, something like that, giving them some guidance. But do you think that really took people much further forward?
I'm not sure that it did. I mean, okay, maybe it puts it on their radar a little bit more, but 145,000 businesses is only part of the population that will be affected. I think there are probably another 100,000 businesses that we think will still be affected by Brexit in one way or another.
That HMRC can't identify, yeah.
Yeah, so it perhaps puts it on their radar and it tells them to start making preparations. But again, you sort of don't really know what you're preparing for.
No, well, we have all those people with their dogs marching on Parliament recently who want guidance for exporting your dogs or travelling with them. There are also a lot of other papers that have been published on other aspects. So, for instance, do you need a driving licence? Are you going to start driving with an international one rather than the UK one? And all of those sorts of things, we just don't know. No. But we are putting out some guidance, both our bodies. You've got a bit more on your website.
We have, we've got 3 specific articles actually on some will go in our Tax Advisor magazine, our monthly magazine to members, but also on our website, taxadvisormagazine.com, some specific Brexit-related articles, and which go into some detail, particularly around if we get no Brexit. Well, and there are some elements actually which, whether we get a deal or not, might change. So, for example, the mini one-stop shop will no longer be in the EU, so businesses won't be able to sign up for the mini one-stop shop. How you get back VAT that you incur in other member states, that will change when we leave the EU as well. So there's a bit of detail around there, and perhaps some of our fact sheets actually will go into a bit more of the mechanisms and dig a little bit deeper when we get a bit nearer the time.
The Tax Advisor articles, are they available for everyone to read or just members of the CIOT?
I believe online on taxadvisormagazine.com.
And so it's open for everybody. We should say all 3 of us are members of the CIOT, and we're also all chartered accountants. And of course, Caroline, you're Chartered Accountants Ireland.
Chartered Accountants Ireland, yes.
And we've been doing quite a lot with CAI. And we had a webinar last week that I think is open for anyone to look at, where Frank Haskew, head of the tax faculty, spoke with Krona from CAI.
Yes, so that's available to watch again.
Yep. And we also have some joint guidance that was written by Chartered Accountants Ireland, which also is freely available on the ICAEW.com website. So between us, I think we've covered just about all that it is possible to publish at the moment, but obviously we will keep you so that you can keep your business clients up to date with developments. Now, the next topic we really want to talk about today, of course, is making tax digital. I know that, Caroline, you've had a few calls from members saying, is it going ahead? John Thompson said we still had to decide.
John Thompson said in the article in Economia that there was a final decision to be made. There was an article in the Times, Mel Stride was quoted about the middle of September to say that yes, it absolutely was going ahead and to forget any possibility of it not doing so. We believe that the pilot will move into public beta around about the end of October, and obviously the budget is the end of October. So I think we probably will get more certainty by the end of this month. But all the indications are that it will go ahead.
So can you just clarify for people, what's the difference between private beta and public beta?
Private beta essentially is HMRC is controlling who is allowed to go in. Once it goes into public beta, a number of things will change. HMRC will start to publish much more detailed guidance on gov.uk. Businesses and agents will be able to go on gov.uk and sign up for MTD. Provided they've got appropriate software, HMRC will not be, they don't have to be invited into the pilot. They do have to meet the eligibility criteria though, because they will probably continue to be quite tight even after we go into public beta.
So at the moment then, we have a very limited number of suppliers, I think. It's about 14 or so that are actually in the pilot.
Well, there are about 60 odd software companies who have successfully tested a product through the MTD system. and I think was it 18?
18, I believe, have actually filed a live VAT return. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So a bunch have signed up. A smaller bunch have actually filed VAT returns. But if you look at the HMRC stats, I think they've got about 200 companies signed up who are going to offer products. Is that right?
So there are actually even 300, but a lot of those will be in-house software developers, where they have registered as software developers with HMRC, but they don't intend to market a product. We don't actually have a split between the commercial products and the ones that are in-house developers.
Right, so this would be like a large group who had an in-house IT team who were going to develop something for their own particular needs.
Yes. So we won't see 300 products.
No.
But it'll be somewhere between, we will see probably 68. But all 68 that are on the current list of prototypes won't necessarily be on the list once we move to public beta.
Okay. Now, there's also going to be a difference between products that are suitable for agents, I think, aren't there, and those that businesses themselves.
Yes, I mean, well, businesses will need to choose MTD-compatible software. HMRC are going to have a software choosers page, or choices page, and it will specify on there whether it's suitable for businesses or agents or both. So it's designed to try and be helpful so businesses or their agents can go onto that page and identify which software products would be most suitable for their needs.
We've actually jumped the gun a bit. The ICAEW.com website on the Brexit Hub, MTD Hub.
Well, they're happening at the same time, so
it's easy to April 2019. But on the MTD Hub, our IT colleagues have been keeping track of the products as they've been listed. I think that is completely up to date at the moment, isn't it, Caroline?
Yes, it is. I think maybe it's probably worth clarifying what we mean by software suitable for agents, because in the last week, a product called Avalara attracted a lot of attention because it is free. And we're trying to ascertain for that and for others as to which products are suitable for agents and not, because it's crucial that agents choose a product that's suitable for them, because if they don't, they're not going to get the full functionality. So they might be able to file a return, but they wouldn't be able to get back all the information from HMRC about how much the client needs to pay, all the payments and liability, VAT account type information back from HMRC. So I think agents will need a product that effectively uses the whole suite of API functionality that HMRC makes available, rather than some of the simpler products which may do the job for a business but won't give the functionality that agents will need.
Do you think we should just talk briefly about the difference between a product that will something of an accounting package that can file directly and the Excel or other spreadsheet packages that are available?
Well, yes, I think, and it's going to be an important choice for businesses as to which route they go down. I mean, there will be lots of businesses who are perhaps using accounting software at the moment, and you would expect just perhaps an add-on
just a box
to become an empty
tick here and we'll file a VAT return.
And to submit the VAT return. And let's face it, there are software products at the moment that do that, and
yes.
What is it, about 13% of businesses currently file their VAT return through software anyway.
But that's a tiny percentage, 13%.
It is, and I think, and the reason for that, as we know, well, as a VAT person, as you said, was that there are so many adjustments that perhaps need to be done before you can submit a VAT return. Unlike for income tax, where if you were signed up to the pilot for income tax or the proposals for income tax, you would just press a button and press send of the information, and it didn't have to be right or anything when you sent it in. But a VAT return clearly does need to be. So there are lots of adjustments which are done, which is why I think the use of spreadsheets will remain for quite some time, and therefore then the bridging software, which will then pick up the information, the 9 boxes essentially from the spreadsheet, and submit that information to HMRC. So I would imagine that perhaps in the short term, bridging products will be quite popular, because perhaps even just as a stopgap to get people to be compliant from April, to get the submissions in, and then perhaps to think a little bit further down the line
yes, what may
which
happen.
Software might be more appropriate for
one
their business.
One of the discussions that has been had many times in recent months is what level of data does HMRC want? And I think there's probably a difference between what they're going to get in the first year or two and what they might be aspiring towards in the future. And I personally think that that's perhaps where the spreadsheet software solution, we might see the landscape change
Yes.
in the future. Caroline?
I think so, but there are, I mean, people were concerned about whether there would be spreadsheet bridging products available. Well, I think that concern is
clearly
been
there are.
It's almost about 50-50. I personally don't see them having a long-term future, but I think that that is something that is well down the road, because I think that at the moment the software market isn't fully developed enough, and people on margin schemes, group registrations, divisional registrations, there are far too many categories of people who can't just use an off-the-shelf product.
Yeah, and of course there are certain categories at the moment, categories of business that can't join the pilot even when it goes public.
Absolutely. I mean, there are about 1.1 million businesses who will be in scope from next April. Even when we go into public beta, we think that probably only about 600,000 of those would be able to join the pilot, because the types of groups that are excluded are partnerships, for example, charities, businesses that are not up to date with their tax affairs, businesses that trade with the EU, annual filers. There are a number of different groups, and it's all on our entity hub.
And we should just emphasise that these are just temporary exclusions. They can't join the pilot.
These are temporary exclusions, but what we don't know is the timetable for exactly when HMRC is going to relax those eligibility criteria. Because there's still 500,000 businesses that, even if they wanted to join the pilot whenever it goes into public beta, wouldn't be able to do so.
And at the beginning of this discussion, Richard, we mentioned a joint letter that had been written by our joint presidents, and I think these are some of the concerns, aren't they, that were expressed?
They are. I mean, it's unfortunate that we expected the pilot to be opened out a little bit earlier this year. And we're getting a lot closer to April 2019, and we're just concerned about business awareness, business readiness, agents being able to help. I mean, we're about to enter the sort of self-assessment peak, and some of our members have said to us, look, actually, we're going to be snowed under helping people do their self-assessment tax returns or their company tax returns. MTD is going to have to wait until February. And you've got so many challenges sort of competing with each other. So.
It would be unfortunate if the very first VAT return that you were going to submit under the new system was actually not until the one that actually did begin after 1st of April. And we would like people at least to have a chance to submit two in advance, but that seems increasingly unlikely, I think.
Yes.
Okay, so shall we move on to some of our other challenges of the moment? Caroline, you had a couple of queries last week around the 5th of October self-assessment deadline. Do you want to talk about the 5th of October deadline just a minute?
Yes, the 5th of October deadline is the deadline for notifying HMRC of income in 2017-18 that it is chargeable. So that is the deadline for notifying. HMRC put out a press release reminding people of the deadline. It was a little bit confusing because it misstated the self-assessment criteria and got muddled up between notifying chargeability and going into self-assessment. What we often get asked is, for example, take dividends, which actually featured in one of the newspapers at the weekend. One doesn't need to go into self-assessment unless one has got dividends of £10,000, but obviously there's a band between £5,000 and £10,000 where there is going to be tax due, and the taxpayer is obliged to notify HMRC that there is tax due. Within that band, what HMRC will do is, if possible, they will collect the tax through PAYE, but there will be situations where they can't, and so they will need to issue a self-assessment tax return. But it causes a lot of confusion, that difference between the two. But I think the important thing to realise is the 5th of October deadline has been missed, you effectively have until the 31st of January, because provided any tax has been paid by that date, the risk of failure to notify penalties is negligible. And late filing penalties can only be charged based on the date that the tax return was issued. So although the 5th of October is the statutory deadline, there is a little bit more time to get things
Yes, if
right.
you've done everything you need to do and paid your tax. It's difficult to see what penalty they could generate.
Exactly, yeah.
But of course, say talk about doing all you need to do, there is a category of taxpayer who has filed a self-assessment tax return in the past, so they are in the system, they have a UTR. There is a temptation, is there not, for those people to file an unsolicited tax return, and that causes all sorts of problems, doesn't it?
It does. HMRC is very keen that agents do not file unsolicited tax returns using what are...
Or members of the public either, actually.
Or members of the public,
Yeah.
using what is a dormant UTR, a dormant tax reference. Because the issue is communication between the two different systems. People in PAYE are in what's called the NPS system. People in self-assessment or in the self-assessment system, the two don't always talk to each other very well, and so it is not unusual to get duplicate calculations. So if somebody is going to self-assessment, I think the message is you need to register properly to ensure that you don't also get a calculation from the NPS system. And of course the problem is it can be timing, because actually HMRC has already sent out most of the calculations from that system. So the issues are duplicate calculations, but also if the person is self-employed, the issue is that they won't be properly registered for Class 2 national insurance.
Of course, yes. Okay, so don't send back an unsolicited return, because it can go horribly wrong.
Indeed.
Now, talking about things going horribly wrong, shall we move on to a little bit of budget speculation? Now, ICAEW has written its budget letter, and our budget letter was sent to Mel Stride a couple of weeks ago. And unusually, we have said, please do nothing. We don't want any new tax policies, please, announced in the budget, because we feel we've got enough change going on at the moment. Would you agree with that?
I think we
Richard?
would very much agree with that. Yes, there's sort of a time of, well, I can't say relative calm, can we? But like you say,
no.
Businesses and advisors have got enough to deal with in the short term.
Yes,
So
no new bright ideas.
No, not. Well, I said no new bright ideas. If the bright ideas that start from the very beginning. So we'd like
By
to do
very
this.
beginning, you mean the policy setting process?
Yes. So when sort of tax measures are introduced, there's a sort of a framework that should be followed, which starts at sort of stage one, which is almost blue sky thinking, and then works through different stages to a bit more detailed, then the draft legislation, then implementation, and then some review even after the event, which is sadly missing.
Unusual.
Yes. So actually, we would very much welcome things that start at stage one of the process, because actually, they will take probably a couple of years to get introduced anyway, but you would like to think that having a thorough and full consultation, what gets introduced will be in pretty good, whatever it is, it will be in good shape at that point.
Should be actually doable.
Yes, yes.
So for instance, to pick a topic that is in the press at the moment, again, tax relief for pensions. So the way we would like them to begin the discussion is to say, we would like to encourage people to save for their old age. Any ideas? But they don't tend to do that. So we have a number of options for raising money for the NHS, I think, is what the government is looking to do. Pension speculation, there's quite a lot around reducing tax relief for higher rate taxpayers. Views? Likely?
Well, it's been suggested for about the last 10
years.
fiscal events, so I guess one day it's going to be...
But I guess the message is, if you have got clients who haven't taken advantage of their £40,000 or whatever the particular one is,
to think about using that before the 5th of April.
Before the 5th of April.
Yeah.
Sort of usual stuff. And of course that 40,000 annual allowance could be brought down, couldn't it?
Yeah,
in future years.
We've seen quite a few changes to the allowances and the lifetime allowance in recent years.
We've already got some people have got a £10,000 allowance.
For higher rate,
and I think, I think there is a compliance issue there, particularly for people who are on final salary pension schemes. It can be really difficult for them to actually get the figures together and understand how much they have actually been deemed to contribute. It's quite tricky.
And the value of their pot could, of course, easily exceed the lifetime allowance.
And exceed the increase can exceed the annual one quite easily.
Yes, so
NHS particularly.
Any changes there? No, but you do have a point on Littrick, though.
Yes, well, I mean, we've talked about essentially one end of the scale, haven't you? Hitting the lifetime allowance and people that got quite a healthy pension pot. But a lot of people on lower incomes, I think there was an estimate of over 1.2 million people who have been auto-enrolled into a pension scheme, but don't actually earn enough to benefit from the tax relief that you would otherwise be allowed, as a taxpayer, whether you relieve the basic or the higher rate.
And presumably that would include low-income people who work part-time.
Yes.
A number of those.
Yeah. And so Littrick put in a budget representation to ask the government to do something about that, to address that, because actually in some schemes the tax relief is paid directly to into the pension rather than through essentially the pay-as-you-earn system. So that's something that Littrick have recommended that the government look at.
Right. So
it's all down to the fact that you can get pension relief on the first. I think it's 2,880 or something. Even if you don't need relevant earnings, you get the tax relief on that first little tranche, whatever you're earning.
But that was only ever brought in, or the thought was that would help grandparents to get their grandchildren to start saving up for a pension, wasn't it? Yes. I don't think even then they were thinking about low-income earners.
Well, because it was brought in before auto-enrolment,
Yes. So it is actually a problem area. Well, let's hope that somebody listens to that and that the low-income tax reform group gets their reform. That'd be good.
Indeed, yes.
Then we've got the additional rate of stamp duty land tax for overseas purchasers.
Yes, we saw Theresa May announce something like that. And again, I suppose going back to what we were talking about, the consultation framework, we've seen various measures around SDLT and landlords, the finance cost restriction, all geared to trying to, help the housing market, help first-time buyers. And it's one of those where, is this going to be a policy that's decided and so therefore you consult on how it works?
Yeah.
Or should we go back a stage to stage one and say, look, actually what we're trying to do is make houses more affordable for first-time buyers and so on. Do we need to look at things in the round?
Can't help feeling there are several different markets going on here that is confusing. And then at the weekend we saw speculation about a possible landlord exemption from capital gains tax if they were to sell their properties to people who've been renting them for a number of years. I can see an immediate problem there with the value of the property, how you'd raise the money to buy it, but again, it's your point, isn't it, Richard?
And well,
if that's
again,
what you want to do.
It sounds like a measure that, in theory, could be so easy to abuse.
Yeah.
So therefore, you would have to have layers of anti-avoidance legislation to sort of target it at the right people.
Yeah.
And we already know how thick the sort of yellow and orange books are. Do we want another sort of half an inch added to?
No, we don't. No, we don't. And then just to finish up, off payroll working. Is that going to be extended, do we think, from April 2019, from the public to the private sector? Or do you think April 20? Where's the good money going?
Well, you'd like to think, if it was going to take place, you would like to think that
I've just rather jumped the gun.
Assuming that it does.
Assume that it will happen.
Yes, and there is we put in representations as a possible alternative approach, but you can sort of almost see the direction
you can't
of travel.
have two systems.
Well, that's the sort of the argument, isn't it, to
Yeah.
sort of make things consistent. But there's so much happening next year.
Well, and the public sector stuff isn't working properly. So there are lots of bits of that need to be fixed.
Yes, and also, well, I don't know the numbers in terms of the different populations, but the public sector is perhaps this big and the private sector is much wider.
Yeah,
So,
and how do you reach the private sector to
Much
educate
harder
them?
to reach, yeah. And of course there was that case that one of HMRC's contractors took claiming worker rights, not
Yeah.
employee rights, claiming worker rights. So maybe that will make somebody think. Let's hope.
yes.
Well, I think the only thing we can be fairly sure of is that the freeze on fuel duty will go ahead. Teresa
That'd be
said so,
welcome.
did she
Yes,
not?
I think so.
She did.
So-
Yes.
Well, it'll be welcome, except I guess it won't help those with electric cars, but they've probably
No.
had quite a lot of help so far. Well, thank you very much indeed for joining us today, Richard. Thank you, Caroline, as ever. And we hope that you'll join us again for our November Tax Talk, although, of course, we will be having a budget special. Thank you for joining us.